of Leeds, Belfast apparently consistently ranks at the top 20s of the study, ahead of the other two United Kingdom cities. On the Eastern European side, we have Sofia from Bulgaria, Brno and Prague from the Czech Republic, and Prague moved up from its 2000 ranking into 2008, but maintained its position on number 14 for 2009. Also part of this list, as Avi mentioned earlier, would be Tallinn from Estonia and Budapest from Hungary. Budapest is identified as one of the steady climbers since 2007, then ranked number 28, jumping 3 spots per year to its current number 22 ranking for 2009. We also have Krakow and Warsaw from Poland. Rank variations across the years will show Krakow to be one of the top gainers, coming from rank number 16 in 2007, going all the way up to rank number 4 in 2009. Then we have Bucharest from Romania, as well as 3 locations in Russia, namely Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, and St. Petersburg. Slovakia has Bratislava, while Slovenia is represented by Ljubljana. To close this list is Ukraine, whose city, Kiev, also made it to the list. Let's now further focus on the centers of excellence in these countries. For today, we would like to zero in on 6 locations, 2 from Western Europe and 4 from Eastern Europe. First on this list would be Dublin in Ireland. And Dublin, as previously mentioned, is considered to be one of the most mature or emerged locations for outsourcing, and is the only Western city considered as such outside Indian and Philippine cities. This distinction comes from their ITO expertise in research and development, advanced infrastructure services, as well as custom development application. Some of the companies that have been operating in Dublin for quite some time would be SAP, Quest Software, IBM, Microsoft, Accenture, Marino Software, among others. The only parameter worth mentioning is its cost disadvantage over competing cities, more particularly in nearshore locations such as Eastern European cities. Another consistent name on our list would be Belfast. Its ranking is ahead of 2 other UK cities and is mainly attributed to its status as a capital city of Northern Ireland. With available workforce to sustain growth of the industry, aside from having an established business environment. Now, companies like Barclays, HPEDS, First Data, HCL has discovered the strength of Belfast in terms of financial analytics, R&D, and applications development management. Krakow in Poland also made it to the Centers of Excellence list. This is due mainly on the fact that they provide excellent service in business analytics, finance, and accounting outsourcing, HR outsourcing, and a unique facet, which is multilingual contact support. These competencies have opened the doors for companies like Google, IBM, and Motorola to utilize the city's technical skills, while Capgemini, General Electric, and Lufthansa, among others, have set up multilingual contact center operations. Prague in the Czech Republic puts a lot of focus on HR outsourcing and research and development. Prague is also an emerging destination for engineering design services. Its rise in the rankings is attributed mainly to the growth of its service level maturity, specific to the processes mentioned. However, Prague faces the problem of saturation with a relatively small city population. It's only about 1.9 million in the city and a total of 10 million in the Czech Republic. Companies located in the city include Sun Microsystems, GE, and Mahindra Satyam, to name a few. Now comes Budapest in Hungary. Their core expertise lies on HR outsourcing, research and development focused on software development and testing. Though the city attracts talent from across the nation and neighboring countries, its primary challenge is the small labor pool, which has the propensity to increase average salary costs. This is compounded further as multiple IT sectors are observed to be competing for the same talent pool. Companies that have established business units in Budapest include Genpact, Cognizant, Canon, TCS, and SCA. Moving now to Russia, the highly capable technical talent in the country is better geared to deliver higher-end software engineering and specialized R&D related processes. St. Petersburg and Moscow are both recognized as centers of excellence for engineering and R&D services. However, with a 40 to 50% lower salary cost in St. Petersburg compared to Moscow, it attracts more investments in the outsourcing space. Boeing, Luxoft, Arcadia are just 3 out of a long list of companies that are currently doing business in St. Petersburg. Now, to conclude my side of the presentation, it's quite obvious that there are more Eastern European locations in the list as compared to Western Europe. This does not necessarily mean that cost is the sole driver for this outcome. Eastern Europe's primary value proposition is that it is a feasible nearshore destination to Western European clients for several reasons. Western European clients would continue to prefer Eastern Europe rather than the traditional offshore locations like India or the Philippines due to the unique service delivery profile of Eastern Europe. Factors such as cultural affinity, skills expertise, and labor pool availability, which include engineers and scientists, manpower that is not abundantly found in offshore locations, contribute to this appeal. Bottom line, Eastern Europe would continue to maintain this advantage at least in the near term. Avi, I hand it over back to you so that you could conclude what is being discussed for this webinar.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Just to conclude the presentation today, looking at some of the key opportunities in Eastern Europe and some of the key challenges over there, I think one of the things for Eastern Europe is the fact that if people on the call are experienced of doing business, especially in continental Europe, it is not about English, it is about different European languages, and also there needs to be a significant compatibility from a cultural perspective. Most of the sales within that region have to have a significant amount of local presence, local relationship. And so what makes the US and the UK work is not necessarily enough for working in the Western economy. So for that reason, Eastern Europe has always been a must in terms of a part of a solution for the Western Europe as such. And Eastern Europe offers, as a conglomerate of all these countries that are there, a significant, a very, very strong value proposition. So in fact, if any of the firms are doing business for outsourcing within the continental Europe, Western Europe, they have to have a location in Eastern Europe. And if they have at least one location in Eastern Europe, it's much easier tapping in to the opportunities and the talent and skill that exist in the rest of the Eastern Europe. And I think that nearshore advantage was there before, and we believe with the trend that we have seen even outside of Europe, the trend we have seen, I think the nearshore advantage will become stronger. Eastern Europe has an excellent education system with a very significant rate of employability. NASSCOM in India, for example, talks about employability of about 30% of its workforce into this industry of BPO and IT, whereas Eastern Europe almost has twice the number of that employability, ranging for most of the countries from 50 to 60% employability of graduates in that country. Again, as we said before, there's an excellent cultural and linguistic compatibility in Eastern Europe for clients in Western Europe. Again, Eastern Europe is part of Europe Union, and if you look at it, Europe, the Western Europe itself has very stringent and significant laws in terms of the data privacy, and the Data Act is extremely strong. And so the Eastern Europe essentially has a significant advantage in terms of the same trade laws and provides a significant amount of incentives for people who want to bring work from the EU, and also most of these countries having a common currency. Again, the time zone affinity is there, and the infrastructure and connectivity is also very strong now in most parts of Eastern Europe. So that was all good news. However, there are still certain inhibitors in Eastern Europe that have been there for some time and keep lingering on, that needs to be worked on. So there has been a history of communism in a significant number of countries in Eastern Europe, and so there is a higher level of bureaucracy in these countries. Again, the level of corruption in some of the Eastern European nations is there, and it leads to additional cost. When you talk about the labor and talent, there has been a significant amount of migration of talent, especially as soon as the country has been included in the European Union, to other Western European countries as well as UK. And so there has put a strain in some of the cities in terms of the labor and the talent pool. And if you see some of the rankings that you have that have seen changes over the years in our study, the number one factor for that ranking to change is essentially the availability of the labor and talent pool. With this, we conclude our presentation today for the Eastern Europe, and I think I'll hand it over back to Ed to facilitate some question and answers.
Thank you, Avinash and Jonathan, for an excellent presentation. We would now open up the floor, or rather open up the air for questions from the participants. In fact, I had a few questions myself, so maybe I'll start off with one of those, and we will take on the questions from the participants after that. One was that, Avinash, looking at the macroeconomic scenario in world over, and specifically in some of the European countries, has that led to any dilution of the key value propositions that some of these countries have had? Like, for example, in the case of Hungary, the Hungarian currency has really gone into a turmoil. Does that affect Budapest in any manner? What's your overall appreciation of this particular issue?
Jonathan?
Ed, thanks for that question. If you look at the basic essence of outsourcing, it's really to cut costs. And given the fact that majority of the income coming from outsourcing is export-oriented, there's very little emphasis in terms of your own currency. There's actually more significant impact in terms of the currency of the source geography rather than your own. As in the case of the Philippines, there's very little impact in terms of how the peso gets devalued against the US dollar. And I guess the same goes for the European outsourcing nations. Avi, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, no, I think if you look at it, Ed, if I hear you right, I mean, the Hungary currency has gone down further versus the EU, and I think that's in some ways it's not a good thing for the country itself. But if you were to look at it from an outsourcing perspective, I think it makes it attractive, because what we have seen in most of the countries is there has been normally an appreciation, or the currency has appreciated marginally. But at the same time, I think there are lots of other things that have become higher. For example, you've seen salary inflation in places like India, China, and Philippines. And Hungary was